The nurse looked down at the visitor log, frowned slightly, then looked back at me like she had just noticed something she wasn't supposed to notice. "That's strange," she murmured softly. My throat burned when I tried to speak. "What is—" She hesitated for half a second, too long. "Someone's been coming every night," she said. "But they never sign their name." At the time, I was too exhausted to understand why that mattered. Too weak to care. I had tubes running into both arms, a dull ache pressing through my ribs every time I breathed, and fluorescent hospital lights bleaching the room into the kind of cold emptiness that makes time stop feeling real. But if you've ever been abandoned by the people who were supposed to love you most, then you already know something about silence. You know how loud it can become. And maybe while you're listening to this, somewhere in the world, it's late at night where you are too, and someone you trusted still hasn't called back. I didn't realize it yet, lying there in that hospital bed. But the person walking into my room after midnight was about to destroy everything my parents had spent 30 years pretending to be. My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm 31 years old, and 5 days before, that nurse checked the visitor log. My mother was screaming at me over flower arrangements for my sister's engagement party while I was quietly trying not to pass out in the middle of a restaurant. That's the thing about my family. Emergencies only mattered when they happened to Emily. My younger sister had a talent for turning every inconvenience into a full-scale emotional crisis. A chipped nail before graduation. A delayed flight to Miami. A boyfriend who took 3 hours to text back. Somehow every room bent around her moods like gravity itself. And my parents, Richard and Diane Whitmore, spent their entire lives orbiting her. Emily was warmth, charm, effortless beauty. Blonde hair, blue eyes, the kind of smile people trusted immediately. I was the practical daughter, the dependable one, the one who solved problems quietly while everyone else took credit for surviving them. In our family, I existed somewhere between unpaid assistant and emotional insurance policy. Claire can handle it. My father used to say whenever something difficult came up, and eventually, everyone believed him, including me. By 31, I worked 60-hour weeks as an operations coordinator for St. Vincent Medical Center in downtown Chicago. I managed staffing schedules, compliance paperwork, vendor disputes, basically every invisible crisis that kept the hospital functioning, while surgeons collected awards in front of cameras. I was good at it too. Calm under pressure. Organized. Reliable. The kind of woman people leaned on without ever asking if she was tired. But exhaustion doesn't always announce itself dramatically. Sometimes it builds slowly, quietly, like water rising beneath floorboards. You don't notice the damage until the structure starts collapsing underneath you. The first warning came 3 months earlier. Sharp pain beneath my ribs. Dizzy spells. Constant fatigue I blamed on overwork. I kept going anyway. Emily's engagement consumed the family group chat 24 hours a day. Venue tour. Dress fittings. Champagne tastings. My mother called me almost every evening asking for favors. She phrased like obligations. "You're better at handling details than Emily. Your sister's overwhelmed. Family helps family." Meanwhile, no one noticed I had stopped eating full meals because nausea hit me almost every afternoon. No one noticed I looked pale in every photo. No one asked why my hands trembled slightly whenever I lifted a coffee cup. Then came the dinner. The one I should have canceled. Emily wanted everyone together at some upscale steakhouse downtown to celebrate finalizing the wedding venue. I remember the chandelier light reflecting off wine glasses, the smell of rosemary and butter, my mother criticizing the floral centerpiece while Emily laughed beside her, scrolling through bridal inspiration photos. I remember gripping the edge of the table because suddenly the entire room tilted sideways. "Claire," my father said sharply, annoyed more than concerned. "Are you even listening?" I opened my mouth to answer him. But before I could speak, the world went black. When consciousness returned, it came in fragments. First, the sound. A monitor beeping somewhere near my head in slow, steady intervals. Then the smell, antiseptic, cold air, plastic tubing. Finally the pain, dull and deep beneath my ribs, like something heavy had been stitched inside me. I tried opening my eyes and immediately regretted it. The hospital room blurred together in washed-out whites and pale blue shadows. Someone noticed I was awake because a nurse appeared beside the bed almost instantly, adjusting something connected to my IV. "Easy," she said gently. "You're okay." But the strange thing was, she said it with the careful tone people use when they know you are not okay at all. My throat felt raw. What happened? The nurse hesitated. Not long. Just enough for me to notice. "You collapsed at the restaurant. Internal complications." The surgery took longer than expected, but the doctors were able to stabilize everything. Stabilize. Such a strange word. Like my body had become a dangerous situation somebody managed to contain temporarily. I blinked slowly and looked toward the chair beside my bed. Empty. For some reason, that hurt more than the pain in my abdomen. "My parents?" I asked quietly. The nurse glanced toward the doorway before answering. "They were here earlier." "Earlier? Not now." I already knew what that meant before she finished speaking. "Your mother said they needed to leave because of a family event." I stared at the ceiling tiles above me while something cold settled into my chest. Of course, Emily's engagement dinner. Emily's flowers. Emily's perfect little life that apparently could not survive one evening without an audience. How long ago? The nurse checked the chart in her hands. About 9 hours? 9 hours. They had left me unconscious in a hospital bed for 9 hours. I do not know why that number stayed with me the way it did. But it lodged itself somewhere deep inside my mind like a crack spreading silently through glass. The nurse adjusted my blanket carefully. I could tell she wanted to say something comforting. But hospital workers learn quickly which wounds medicine cannot touch. "Your doctor will be back in the morning," she said softly before leaving me alone with the machines and the silence. Outside the room, I could hear distant footsteps echoing through the hallway, soft conversations, elevator chimes. Somewhere down the corridor, somebody laughed, life continuing normally, while mine sat suspended in fluorescent light and morphine haze. I reached slowly for my phone on the bedside table. 3 unread messages. All from my mother. The first one, "Surgery went well. Thank God." The second, 2 hours later, "Emily's dinner is running late. We'll come back tomorrow." The third arrived just 15 minutes earlier. "Don't stress yourself out tonight. Rest matters more than visitors right now." I read that last sentence 3 times. Visitors. As if they were not my parents. As if showing up for their daughter after emergency surgery was some optional social obligation squeezed between champagne toasts and wedding speeches. I locked the phone and set it face down beside me. Something inside me felt strangely calm, suddenly not forgiveness, not acceptance. More like exhaustion, finally becoming honesty. Because the truth was, part of me had spent my whole life waiting for one moment, dramatic enough to make them choose me first. Cancer would do it. Surgery would do it. Collapse in public, and maybe they would finally panic. Maybe then I would matter enough. But lying there alone in that dim hospital room, I realized something terrifying. There was no emergency large enough to compete with Emily. A quiet knock interrupted my thoughts near midnight. I assumed it was another nurse until I saw two hospital administrators standing just outside the doorway, whispering urgently to each other. One of them looked nervous. The other looked pale. Then both men stepped aside at exactly the same moment, like someone important was approaching. And suddenly, the entire hallway outside my room went completely silent. The silence outside my room did not feel normal. Hospitals are never truly quiet. There is always movement somewhere, a distant cart rattling across tile floors, nurses exchanging shift notes, televisions murmuring behind half-closed doors. But this silence felt deliberate, like the entire hallway had inhaled at once and forgotten how to breathe. I pushed myself slightly higher against the pillows, despite the sharp pull in my abdomen. Through the narrow gap in the doorway, I saw two nurses straighten their posture almost instantly. One smoothed the front of her scrubs nervously. Then a man stepped into view wearing a dark charcoal coat over a crisp white shirt. The kind of effortless elegance that did not need to announce wealth, because it already expected obedience. He looked to be in his late 50s, silver at his temples. Calm, unreadable expression. The strange thing was not him. It was everyone else. The administrators who usually barked orders at exhausted staff suddenly looked like anxious interns waiting for approval. One of them spoke first in a voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Hale, we can arrange a private conference room if you would prefer." Mr. Hale. The name hit something faintly familiar in the back of my mind, though the medication haze made it slippery. The man ignored the suggestion completely. His eyes settled on me instead. Steady, focused, not curious, not sympathetic, like he already knew exactly who I was. "Claire Whitmore," he said quietly. Not a question. My throat tightened. "Do I know you?" For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not quite emotion, more like recognition. "No," he said after a pause. "But my daughter does." Confusion cut through the fog in my head instantly. "Your daughter." He stepped farther into the room, and suddenly I understood why the hallway had frozen around him. Nathan Hale, founder of Hale Medical Partners, billionaire donor, the man whose name sat on half the buildings inside St. Vincent Medical Center. I had seen him once years ago at a corporate fundraising gala from across a ballroom, crowded with executives and politicians. Men like Nathan Hale did not visit ordinary patient rooms after midnight. They especially did not stand beside women like me. "I think there's been some mistake," I said carefully. "I've never met your daughter." Another pause. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his coat and removed a folded photograph worn slightly at the corners from being handled too often. He handed it to me without speaking. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it slowly. The breath left my lungs all at once. The photo showed a young woman sitting in a hospital wheelchair beside a Christmas tree decorated with paper snowflakes. Thin face. Bald from treatment. Pale smile. And kneeling beside her holding a cup of hot chocolate was me. 5 years younger. Tired. Wearing navy blue hospital scrubs from a volunteer overnight shift, I barely even remembered anymore. Her name is Lily, Nathan said quietly, and according to my daughter, you were the only person who stayed with her the night she thought she was going to die. I stared at the picture while fragments of memory surfaced slowly through the years. A winter storm. Pediatric oncology floor. A teenager crying because her parents' flight had been delayed during treatment complications. I remembered sitting with her after my shift ended because she was terrified of sleeping alone. I remembered missing the last train home that night, but I had never known who she was. Never asked. That was years ago, I whispered. Nathan's gaze hardened slightly, then, though not toward me, toward something else, something distant. Yes, he said. And tonight my daughter called me from Boston crying because she discovered the woman who kept her alive emotionally through chemotherapy was left alone after major surgery by her own family. The room suddenly felt smaller somehow. Colder. More dangerous. Nathan looked toward the empty chair beside my bed, then back at me. Claire, he said carefully, why did hospital administration tell me your emergency contact refused to return tonight because your sister had an engagement celebration? Before I could answer, another voice suddenly cut through the hallway outside. Loud, familiar. Angry. What do you mean we can't go in there right now? My mother. The second my mother's voice hit the hallway, something changed in Nathan Hale's expression. It was subtle. A tightening around the eyes. The kind of shift powerful people make when they suddenly stop being polite and start paying attention. Outside my room, I could hear Diane Whitmore arguing with someone near the nurse's station. I am her mother, she snapped. Whatever this ridiculous delay is, fix it immediately. My father's lower voice followed behind hers, calmer but colder. We were told there was some sort of administrative issue. Administrative issue. That was how my parents processed emotional disasters. They converted them into inconveniences, with paperwork attached. Nathan glanced once toward the hallway before turning back to me. Do you want them in here? It should have been an easy question. They were my parents. Most daughters would have answered automatically. But lying there in that hospital bed, exhausted and stitched together both physically and emotionally, I realized I did not actually know. Because wanting your parents and trusting your parents are not always the same thing. Before I could respond, my mother appeared in the doorway wearing the same cream-colored cashmere coat she had worn to Emily's engagement dinner. Her makeup was still flawless, hair perfectly styled. She looked less like someone visiting her hospitalized daughter and more like someone arriving late to a luncheon. Then she saw Nathan standing beside my bed. The color drained from her face so quickly, it almost looked painful. Mr. Hale, she said automatically, the sharpness disappearing from her voice at once. My father stopped short behind her. Fusion, flickering across his expression before recognition hit. Richard Whitmore worked in commercial real estate finance. Men like Nathan Hale were not just wealthy to him. They were untouchable. Important enough to alter careers with one conversation. We didn't realize Claire had company. My father said carefully. Company. Again with that word. As if this were social. As if I had invited someone over for coffee instead of waking up after emergency surgery alone. Nathan remained perfectly calm. Apparently neither did your daughter. Silence spread through the room instantly. My mother forced a strained smile. I think there's been some misunderstanding. We were here earlier all evening. Actually, Emily just had an important family event tonight, and Claire insisted we go. The lie landed softly between us like broken glass wrapped in velvet. My stomach tightened. I had spent most of my life protecting my parents from uncomfortable truths, smoothing over their neglect so nobody else would notice it clearly enough to judge them. But suddenly I was too tired to help them anymore. Nathan looked at me instead of them. Did you ask them to leave? My mother's eyes snapped toward me. So quickly I felt the pressure of it physically. That familiar warning look. The one that said, do not embarrass this family. It amazed me how some habits survive even inside hospital rooms. For a second, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then Emily appeared behind them, holding her phone in one hand. Irritation written all over her face. Mom, are we seriously still doing this? She complained before noticing Nathan. Her entire posture changed instantly. Oh my God. She recognized him too. Of course she did. Emily followed wealthy Chicago social circles the way other people followed sports teams. Nathan Hale was practically civic royalty. Suddenly she smiled brightly and stepped farther into the room like she belonged there. Mr. Hale, I'm Emily Whitmore. Claire's sister. Nathan's expression did not change. Yes, he said quietly. I know exactly who you are. Something about the way he said it made Emily hesitate for the first time in her life. My father cleared his throat awkwardly. Mr. Hale, if this concerns the hospital foundation, I assure you our family appreciates everything your organization does. Nathan finally turned toward him fully then, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. This is not about the foundation, he said. This is about your daughter being left alone after major surgery, while your family attended a party. My mother laughed softly. Too quickly. That sounds much harsher than it really was. Nathan did not blink. Does it? Nobody answered. Outside in the hallway, nurses pretended to work while clearly listening. Emily folded her arms defensively. Claire's being dramatic. She murmured. She's always done this thing where she makes people feel guilty for having lives. The words hit harder than I expected because some small, damaged part of me still wanted her to care, still wanted this moment to wake something human inside my family. Instead, Emily looked annoyed that my surgery had interrupted her evening. Nathan looked back at me carefully. Claire, he said, do you know who authorized the private surgical specialist brought in tonight after your complications started? I frowned weakly. No. His jaw tightened slightly. Neither does hospital administration. My pulse slowed strangely at those words. What does that mean? Nathan stared at me for one long, unreadable second before answering. It means someone with extraordinary access intervened in your case before I even arrived. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his coat again and placed a sealed envelope gently on my hospital blanket. Across the front, written in elegant black ink, were 4 words that made my mother suddenly go pale. For Claire. From Elizabeth. For a moment, nobody in the room moved. My mother stared at the envelope like it might explode if anyone touched it. Emily's expression shifted from irritation to confusion. My father looked between Nathan Hale and the handwriting on the front as though trying to solve a problem that suddenly had financial consequences attached to it, but all I could focus on was the name Elizabeth. Something about it tugged at me faintly, deep in the back of my memory. Like hearing a song you have not listened to in years but somehow still know by heart. Nathan stepped back slightly, giving me space. "You should open it," he said quietly. My fingers felt weak as I slid one thumb beneath the seal. The paper inside was thick and expensive, the kind used by people who still write real letters instead of emails. I unfolded it slowly, aware that everyone in the room was watching me. "Claire, if you are reading this," then Nathan finally found you. I stopped breathing for a second. The handwriting was elegant but slightly uneven, as though written by someone recovering from illness. "You probably do not remember me clearly. Most people would not, but I remember you. I remember the night snow covered the hospital windows and you sat beside my daughter for 6 straight hours because she was terrified to fall asleep after her procedure. You missed your train home. You gave her your own sweater because she was cold. And before you left that morning, you told her something I have never forgotten. You told her, being scared does not make you weak. It makes you human." My vision blurred slightly. Across the room, even Emily had gone quiet now. The letter continued. "Lily survived because of excellent doctors. But she endured because of people like you. People who choose kindness when nobody is watching. I wanted to thank you personally. But by the time I was strong enough, you were gone. Nathan helped me search for you for years. Then, 6 months ago, I learned your name appeared on internal reports tied to St. Vincent Medical Center. I planned to contact you myself after my next treatment round, but life does not always wait for perfect timing." A strange coldness spread through me as I read the next line. "If you are receiving this letter now, it means I did not survive long enough to say thank you in person." My chest tightened painfully. Nathan looked away toward the window, and suddenly I understood. Elizabeth was gone. The woman writing this letter had known she was dying while she wrote it. Beneath the hospital machines humming around me, I could almost feel the weight of another room years earlier. Another terrified daughter. Another woman trying desperately to leave something meaningful behind before time ran out. The final paragraph was shorter, more direct. Nathan promised me he would honor my wishes if he ever found you. Please let him. You spent your life making people feel less alone. I hope someday someone finally does the same for you. Below the signature sat a second folded document clipped neatly behind the letter. My hands trembled harder when I unfolded that one. It was legal paperwork, dense paragraphs, corporate seals. My father stepped forward instinctively. "Claire," he said carefully, "what exactly is that?" But Nathan answered before I could speak. Elizabeth Hale established a private charitable trust before she passed. My mother blinked rapidly. A trust. Nathan nodded once. Calm, controlled. Dedicated to funding leadership appointments inside St. Vincent Medical Center for individuals demonstrating extraordinary ethical service. My stomach dropped slowly as realization began piecing itself together. Nathan's eyes settled on me. "Claire Whitmore," he said softly. "Elizabeth personally selected you as the sole recipient." Silence swallowed the room whole. Even the machines beside my bed suddenly seemed too loud. Emily laughed first, short and disbelieving. Wait, what? My father stepped closer now, all traces of emotional distance gone. Mr. Hale, he said cautiously, I think perhaps there's confusion about what this means financially. Nathan's expression hardened instantly. There is no confusion. He reached toward the foot of my hospital bed and picked up the final page attached beneath the trust agreement. Effective immediately. He continued, Claire Whitmore becomes acting executive director of the Hale Patient Advocacy Initiative. My mother's hand flew to her chest. My father went pale. Emily whispered, That's impossible. But Nathan was not finished. He looked directly at me now, and for the first time all night, his voice carried something dangerously close to emotion. There's one more thing you need to know about your surgery tonight. Claire. A terrible feeling settled deep in my stomach before he even spoke again. The specialist who saved your life was not called in by the hospital. He paused. Your father canceled the original consult this morning because your insurance coverage was too expensive. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. The machines beside my bed continued their slow mechanical rhythm, while the entire room seemed to tilt under the weight of what Nathan had just said. My father stared at him like he had misheard the sentence entirely. That is not true, he said immediately. Too quickly. His voice sharper than before. I never canceled anything. But something dangerous had already shifted. Not because of Nathan. Because my father did not look outraged. He looked cornered. Nathan remained perfectly calm. The call was logged through hospital billing at 11:42 this morning. He glanced toward me briefly. The recommendation for an advanced vascular specialist was flagged due to the severity of your internal bleeding risk. Internal bleeding. Hearing the words, spoken aloud, made the situation feel suddenly real, in a way pain medication had protected me from before. My mother folded her arms tightly across her chest. This is completely inappropriate, she snapped. Though there was panic underneath it now. Claire is exhausted. She doesn't need financial details thrown at her in the middle of the night. Financial details. That was still how she framed it. Not fear. Not danger. Expense. I looked at my father carefully, and for the first time in my life, I noticed something I should have seen years ago. Richard Whitmore never defended people emotionally. He defended decisions, numbers, appearances. He approached relationships the same way he approached contracts, calculating what could be justified once the damage was already done. Dad, I said quietly, my throat tightening, did you cancel the specialist? His eyes shifted toward me then, and suddenly he looked tired, older than I remembered. But not guilty enough. Never guilty enough. Claire. Listen to me carefully. He began in the calm corporate tone he used whenever he wanted absolute control over a conversation. The doctors already said your condition was manageable. The additional consult would have cost nearly $80,000 outside your insurance network. I made the decision I believed was reasonable, based on the information we had. Reasonable. My chest hurt worse than the incision suddenly, because there it was. The truth underneath everything. My father had evaluated my survival like a financial negotiation. My mother stepped closer immediately, trying to regain control of the room. Your father was protecting you from unnecessary stress. She insisted. And honestly, Claire, You've always had a tendency to overreact medically. Remember your migraines in college? You terrified everyone for nothing. Nathan's expression darkened slightly. She required emergency surgery tonight. And she got it, my mother snapped back. She is alive? The room fell silent again after that, because somehow those 3 words made everything uglier. She is alive. As though survival itself should automatically erase abandonment, Emily shifted uncomfortably near the doorway, finally speaking again after staying quiet too long. Can we please stop acting like Dad tried to hurt her? Shimura, this is getting ridiculous. I looked toward my sister slowly. I collapsed in front of you. Emily sighed dramatically, avoiding my eyes. And you're okay now. That sentence settled over me with horrifying clarity. Emily genuinely believed the outcome erased the cruelty. If the person survives, then the damage does not count. It explained our entire childhood in one sentence. Nathan moved toward the foot of my bed where the trust documents still rested, untouched. The specialist arrived because an anonymous emergency authorization covered the cost privately. My father frowned. Anonymous. Nathan nodded once. Whoever intervened knew exactly which surgeon Claire needed before the hospital administration approved the escalation. A strange, cold feeling crept through me again. You still don't know who signed it? Nathan looked directly at me. No, outside the room, another administrator appeared near the doorway, holding a tablet with visible anxiety. He whispered something urgently into Nathan's ear. Nathan's expression changed instantly. Not shock. Worse. Recognition. Slowly. He turned back toward me. Claire, he said carefully. There's security footage from the executive elevator. My pulse quickened painfully. Okay, Nathan hesitated for the first time all night. The person who authorized your surgery never entered through public access. My mother's face drained of color again. My father stiffened. Even Emily looked confused now. Nathan lowered his voice slightly. They came from the restricted board level upstairs. Then the administrator holding the tablet spoke quietly into the silence. Sir, she's back. The room seemed to stop breathing. She's back. The administrator repeated quietly, clutching the tablet so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Nathan stared at him for one unreadable second before nodding once. Bring her up. My mother immediately stepped forward. Excuse me, who exactly are we talking about? Nobody answered her. Outside the doorway, the hallway suddenly filled with movement again, quiet but urgent. Nurses stepping aside. Security shifting positions near the elevators. Somewhere down the corridor, I heard the soft metallic sound of private elevator doors opening. My pulse was pounding so hard now I could feel it against the stitches in my abdomen. Nathan moved closer to the bed slightly, his expression calm, in the way people become calm right before something irreversible happens. Emily folded her arms defensively. This is insane. Shimura. Can someone please explain what's happening? But deep down, I think all of us already understood the same thing. Someone had been moving pieces around this hospital long before Nathan arrived. Someone powerful enough to override billing departments, authorize restricted specialists, and access executive-level systems without leaving a trace. And somehow, unbelievably, it all connected back to me. The private elevator doors opened at the far end of the hallway. Every conversation outside stopped instantly. Then a woman stepped out slowly, assisted by a younger nurse at her side. She looked fragile at first glance. Late 60s, maybe. Silver hair pulled neatly behind her head, pale from illness. But the second she lifted her eyes, the entire floor reacted to her presence. Not fear exactly. Respect. Deep enough that people straightened instinctively when she passed. My mother whispered first. No. Nathan exhaled quietly beside me. Claire, he said softly, this is Catherine Mercer. The name hit me immediately. Catherine Mercer, chairwoman of the St. Vincent Medical Board. The woman whose portrait hung inside the administrative wing downstairs. One of the most influential healthcare executives in Illinois. She should not have been here at midnight walking hospital corridors after chemotherapy treatments. Yet she walked directly toward my room without hesitation. My father looked completely stunned now. Mrs. Mercer, he said automatically, almost stumbling over the words. I had no idea you were involved in this matter. Catherine barely acknowledged him. Her eyes settled on me instead. And something painful crossed her face so quickly it almost disappeared before I recognized it. Regret. Claire, she said softly. Her voice sounded thinner than I expected. Weakened by illness, but still carrying authority sharp enough to silence the room. I'm sorry it took me this long to tell you the truth. My stomach tightened instantly. Truth. Another one. Another hidden thing waiting beneath years of silence. My mother looked increasingly panicked now. Tell her what truth? Catherine finally turned toward my parents then. 5 years ago, she said carefully. Your daughter saved my granddaughter's life emotionally during her cancer treatment. Emily rolled her eyes faintly. We already heard that part. Catherine's gaze sharpened instantly. No, she said quietly. You heard the small part? The room went still again. Nathan stepped aside completely, now letting Catherine move closer to my bed. Her eyes never left mine. Lily Mercer is not Nathan Hale's biological daughter, she said. She's mine. Confusion hit all at once. I looked between them. Nathan. Catherine. None of it fit together yet. Catherine continued carefully, each sentence landing heavier than the last. After my daughter died, Nathan helped me raise Lily privately while I underwent treatment. She paused briefly, catching her breath. But when Lily got sick herself, I almost lost her too. The nurse beside Catherine adjusted her arm gently, as if reminding her not to overexert herself. Still, Catherine kept talking. During that winter storm 5 years ago, the oncology floor was critically understaffed. Most volunteers left early. Families went home. But you stayed. Her eyes softened painfully. You sat beside my granddaughter all night because she was terrified. No one would come back for her. Something inside my chest cracked quietly. Then, because I remembered it now. Not just Lily crying in that hospital room, but the exact thing she asked me before falling asleep. You promise people don't leave forever. Right. Catherine's voice trembled slightly. Do you know what Lily said after you left the next morning? I could not answer. She said she wanted to grow up and become someone like you, someone who stays. My mother shifted uncomfortably. My father looked trapped between embarrassment and calculation, desperately trying to understand where this conversation was heading politically, financially, socially. But Catherine was not finished. She slowly reached into the pocket of her coat and removed another document, this one thinner, simpler. She handed it directly to me. 3 months ago, she said quietly, I personally recommended you for promotion to executive administration. I stared at her. What? My father blinked hard. Promotion. Catherine nodded once. Your evaluations were extraordinary. Every department praised you. Every patient advocate trusted you. Her expression darkened slightly then, but the recommendation disappeared before the board vote. The room suddenly felt ice cold. Nathan's jaw tightened beside her. Catherine looked directly at my father now. Until tonight, she said carefully. I didn't know Richard Whitmore was the board member who blocked it. No one spoke after Catherine's words landed in the room. My father looked like a man standing inside a collapsing building, trying to calculate which wall might still hold. The confidence that had carried him through every conversation that night was gone now, replaced by something smaller and uglier. Exposure. My mother was the first to react. Richard, she said quietly. Too quietly, the way people speak when they already know the answer but desperately want permission not to believe it. My father loosened his tie slowly, avoiding everyone's eyes. It was not personal, he said at last. The sentence hung in the air like smoke. Not personal. Somehow that hurt worse than cruelty would, because cruelty at least requires emotion. This had simply been strategy, calculation. A decision made behind conference room doors, while I spent years wondering what was wrong with me. Catherine stared at him with visible disappointment. You buried her promotion recommendation without explanation. I postponed it. My father corrected automatically. There were concerns about optics. Nathan gave a quiet, humorless laugh beside her. Optics. My father's jaw tightened. Claire was emotionally overextended. She lacked executive presence. I almost smiled at that. Executive presence. After years of carrying entire hospital departments through staffing shortages, overnight crises, and administrative failures, the final reason I was not considered leadership material came down to a phrase, vague enough to hide inside forever. My mother suddenly looked at him differently then. Not lovingly. Not supportively. Like she was finally seeing the machinery underneath the man she had spent 35 years defending. You told me the board selected someone more experienced, she whispered. My father rubbed one hand across his forehead tiredly. Because promoting Claire would have changed everything. What does that even mean? I asked softly. He finally looked directly at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear there. Real fear. It meant you would leave us behind. The room fell completely silent again. Even Emily looked confused. My father exhaled shakily. You were already pulling away. Better apartment. Better job. New circles. New people. His voice lowered. Every success pushed you farther from this family. I stared at him, stunned by the honesty buried inside something so selfish. He had not held me back because I was incapable. He held me back because he was terrified of becoming unnecessary. My mother sank slowly into the chair beside the window, her composure finally cracking at the edges. Richard, she whispered again, but there was no defense left in her voice now. Just exhaustion. Emily looked between all of us, like the room had suddenly started speaking another language. Wait, she said slowly. You sabotaged Claire's promotion. My father snapped immediately. Do not make this bigger than it is. Bigger? Emily laughed once in disbelief. Dad, you literally kept her from getting promoted at her own hospital. Her voice softened slightly then, as she looked toward me for the first time all night. I thought you just did not want those positions. That almost broke me. Not because she had hurt me, because she genuinely never noticed. My entire life had become invisible, even to the people living inside it with me. Catherine moved closer to my bed, again, carefully. Her face pale from exhaustion. Claire, she said softly, the board will formally reinstate your appointment once you recover. I looked down at the documents resting in my lap. Executive Director. Leadership Initiative. Everything I had quietly worked toward while believing nobody saw me clearly enough to value me. And somehow the victory did not feel triumphant. Just sad. Deeply sad. Because the people I spent my whole life trying to earn love from only noticed my worth after strangers announced it publicly. Outside the hospital windows, dawn had started bleeding faint gray light into the Chicago skyline. The city looked softer at sunrise, less sharp around the edges. Nurses changed shifts quietly in the hallway. Someone wheeled a breakfast cart past the room. The smell of burnt coffee drifting briefly through the air. Ordinary life continuing again after everything cracked open overnight. My mother stood slowly near the window, arms wrapped around herself now. She looked smaller somehow. Claire, she said carefully, her voice trembling for the first time I could ever remember. I did come back tonight. I looked at her without answering. She swallowed hard. When I got home after Emily's dinner, I walked into your apartment to feed your cat like you asked me to. Her eyes filled suddenly, and I realized I didn't know anything about your life anymore. Something tightened painfully in my chest. My mother looked around the room slowly. The trust documents, the administrators outside, Nathan Hale, Catherine Mercer, all these people who somehow knew more about me than she did. I kept thinking, she whispered, when did everyone else start seeing my daughter more clearly than I ever did? Nobody had an answer for her. Because some realizations arrived too late to undo the years that created them. Nathan quietly helped Catherine toward the doorway as her strength visibly faded. Before leaving, she looked back at me one final time. You stayed with my granddaughter when she was afraid nobody would come back for her, she said softly. Tonight, Claire, people came back for you. After they disappeared down the hallway, the room felt strangely empty despite everyone still standing inside it. My father remained silent near the door. Emily stared at the floor. My mother wiped at her eyes quietly beside the window while the first light of morning touched the edge of my hospital blanket. And for the first time in my life, nobody in the room knew how to pretend we were still the same family we had been yesterday. 3 weeks later, I stood beside the window of my apartment watching early November rain slide slowly down the Chicago skyline. Recovery had turned out to be quieter than I expected. Not dramatic. Not cinematic. Mostly it was small things. Learning how to move carefully without pain pulling through my ribs. Drinking tea that went cold because I forgot it was there. Falling asleep halfway through emails. The human body heals slowly when it has been running on exhaustion for years. So does the heart? The hospital sent flowers every few days after the board publicly confirmed my appointment. Nurses I barely knew stopped by my office with coffee and awkward smiles. People who had worked beside me for years suddenly spoke to me differently, Now, not because I had changed overnight, but because authority has a strange way of making invisible people visible. Nathan visited twice after that night. Never for long. Sometimes he brought updates about the initiative. Sometimes he brought stories about Lily, who was finishing graduate school in Boston and apparently still kept the old paper snowflake I helped her make during chemotherapy. The second visit was quieter. He stood near my kitchen counter holding a cup of untouched coffee before finally saying, "Elizabeth would have liked you very much." I remember looking down at my hands after he said it because grief is strange that way. You can mourn someone you barely knew simply because they saw something in you nobody else ever bothered to notice. My family changed too, though not in the neat way movies pretend people change. My father resigned from the hospital board 2 days after the investigation into blocked appointments quietly began. He never admitted publicly what he had done. Men like Richard Whitmore rarely confess directly. Instead, they retreat behind phrases like timing and professional disagreement until the truth exhausts itself trying to breathe. But something inside him had cracked that night in the hospital room. I saw it the last time we had dinner together. He looked older suddenly, smaller somehow. He spent most of the evening staring at the tablecloth while speaking carefully about weather, traffic, anything except the damage sitting between us. Then, just before the check arrived, he finally said softly, "I thought if you became successful enough, you would stop needing us." I sat there quietly for a long moment before answering. "I stopped needing you years ago," I said gently. "I just never stopped wanting you," he cried after that. Not loudly, just silently into his folded hands, while the restaurant pianist played somewhere near the bar, and strangers continued eating around us, like ordinary life had not just split open at table 14. My mother calls more often now, sometimes too often. She asks questions she should have asked years ago. What books I am reading, whether I am sleeping enough, if I still take cinnamon in my coffee. Small things. Ordinary things mothers usually know already. There is sadness in those conversations because you cannot rebuild 30 years overnight. But there is honesty now too, and honesty is at least something solid to stand on. Emily surprised me the most. A month after the hospital, she showed up at my apartment carrying grocery bags and looking deeply uncomfortable. She stood in my kitchen for nearly 10 minutes before finally blurting out, "I think everybody spent so long treating me like the center of the universe that I forgot other people were real too." It was such a painfully honest thing to say that I almost laughed. Instead, we spent the evening making pasta badly and talking for the first time without competing for oxygen inside the same room. I do not know what our relationship becomes from here. Maybe some wounds heal into scars instead of disappearing completely. Maybe families are less about perfection and more about whether people finally choose to see each other clearly before time runs out. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about that empty hospital chair beside my bed. How devastating it felt at the time. But now, when I remember that room, I remember something else too. The hallway growing quiet, strangers showing up, the realization that love does not always arrive from the people you spent your life trying hardest to earn it from. Sometimes it comes from the people who simply notice your kindness when nobody else is watching. And maybe that is the part that stays with me most now. Not the betrayal, not even the pain. Just the strange, unexpected truth that being abandoned did not mean I was unworthy of being chosen. I think a lot of people spend years believing those are the same thing. Maybe some of you listening have felt that too. Maybe you have sat in your own version of that hospital room, wondering why the people closest to you could not see your worth until someone else finally did. And if you have, then I hope you eventually learn what I did. The people who overlook you do not get to decide your value. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is stop waiting in empty rooms for love that already chose not to come, and start noticing the people quietly walking towards you instead.